Welcome to our tutorial on implementing a stealth game using Java. Today, we'll dive deep into the mechanics involved in a stealth game, covering everything from basic movement to complex AI behavior. In this tutorial, we will be covering several key topics. We'll start with understanding the game requirements, followed by the basic game setup. Then we'll implement player movement, add environmental elements like walls, and finally create an enemy AI that can detect the player. Let's begin by discussing the requirements for our stealth game. Our game will consist of a player trying to navigate through a maze while avoiding enemies. The player can move around using the keyboard, and the enemy will patrol predefined paths, attempting to catch the player if they come too close. Now that we have a clear understanding of our game requirements, let's set up our project. Create a new Java project in your favorite IDE, and make sure to include a game library such as libgdx or JavaFX to handle our graphics. Let's create the basic classes we'll need for our game. These include classes for our player, enemy, and game world. Start by creating a new Java class named GameWorld. This class will manage the game loop and all game entities. Next, let's implement our player class. The player will have properties such as position and movement speed. Create a new class named Player with a position variable and a method for updating the player's position based on user input. Now, let's create our enemy class. The enemy will have a simple AI that allows it to patrol a set path. Once we have that, we will update the enemy's position in the game loop. With both player and enemy classes set up, we can now focus on the game rendering. We will need to draw the player and the enemies on the game window. Let's add a method in our GameWorld class for rendering the game objects. It's time to bring everything together in your main class. This class will initialize the game and run the main game loop. Inside the game loop, we will call our update and render methods. Next, let's add collision detection between our player and the enemies. We want to end the game if the player gets too close to an enemy. We can use simple bounding box collision detection for this. To enhance the stealth mechanics, let's add some visibility detection for our enemy AI. For this, we'll determine if the player is in the line of sight of an enemy based on their position. Now, let's implement a simple level design. The player and enemies will have walls to navigate around. We can represent walls with a list of coordinates. Let's create a class to represent these walls and manage their collision. We can gather all our walls in the GameWorld class and check for collisions during updates. Let's add walls to the game and check for collisions. To provide feedback to the player, let's add some sound effects that play when an enemy detects the player or when the player runs into a wall. We will need a sound library such as Java Sound or an external library like JLayer. Additionally, let's implement a simple scoring system for the player. The player will earn points for successfully avoiding detection and reaching designated target areas. Finally, let's put together everything we have implemented into a cohesive experience. We will create a start screen and a game over screen to improve the user experience. With this step-by-step implementation, you now have a solid foundation for your stealth game in Java. This game can be expanded in many ways, such as adding power-ups, different enemy types, and more complex AI behaviors. Thank you for joining me in this tutorial. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. Let me know in the comments what features you'd want to add next.